Welcome to the Horror Chronicles channel. Today's story takes us on a spine-chilling journey to a cursed house, haunted by ghostly apparitions. Join us as we delve into the terrifying tale of a dream turned into a haunting nightmare. Intro. Since I was a kid, I always dreamed of owning my own home. I spent years saving and working hard to finally make this dream come true. My new home was exactly what I'd always wanted, a house with a big backyard. However, what made this patio special was the majestic tamarind tree standing in its center. I have loved tamarind since I was little. I remember the sweet and sour taste of the fruits, and I always thought that one day would have my own tree. When I found this house and saw the beautiful tamarind tree in the yard, I knew it was the perfect place for me. But dreams can turn into nightmares, and I soon discovered that my new home contains dark secrets. A few days after I moved, I noticed someone was exploiting my tamarind tree without my permission. Looks like someone has been sneaking into my garden and taking some tamarind at night. I decided to take action to stop it. I built a high fence around my property, hoping it would deter intruders. For a few days, this procedure seemed to work. I saw no sign of anyone crossing the fence. In addition, I was able to harvest tamarind with peace of mind. But one night, I was woken up terrified by strange noises coming from the cellar. I thought it might be some rodents that crept inside, so I decided to go down and have a look. Putting some mousetraps in should fix the problem, or so I thought. I went down cautiously, turning on the cellar light. A faint glow lit up the room, revealing a space that was dusty and littered with old boxes. I slowly moved forward, my heart pounding in my chest. So, I saw it. A little boy, no more than 7 years old, was standing in front of me. He was shirtless, which showed his inhuman thinness. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes were set deep in their sockets. It looked like a living corpse. The boy looked at me piercingly, his lips curved into a ghastly grin. His presence emanated from a cold sense of malice that shuddered me to the bone. I could not move from his dark, empty eyes, which seemed to absorb all the light around them. The boy did not say a word, but held some tamarind in his hands. I was baffled, trying to understand how I got there. He had blocked all the entrances to the cellar, except for one small window, but it was so narrow that not even his head could fit through it. A shiver ran down my spine when I realized the boy must have entered in a way that was impossible to explain. The darkness of the cellar seemed to close in around me, adding to the sense of impending danger. I tried to slowly back away, but an inexplicable force kept me on the ground, as if the environment itself had turned hostile. The boy took a step forward and knocked the tamarind to the ground with a blow. My heart was pounding hard as I tried to find a plausible explanation for what I was witnessing. Could the boy be connected to the theft of tamarinds in my garden? Without warning, the boy looked up at the ceiling and started laughing, a laugh that echoed down the cellar and echoed in my ears. It was a terrifying, painful laugh, full of malice and contempt. The sound pierced my soul, filling me with indescribable fear. I asked the boy hesitantly what he was doing downstairs so late, but he did not answer. Instead, he began to move in a strange, almost inhuman way. He walked to the window, climbing up the boxes with hideous dexterity, like a twisted spider. My eyes widened in horror as I watched the boy untie his limbs and begin to climb out of the small window. Every movement was frightening, every joint moving in unnatural directions. I felt indescribable fear. When I finally got out completely, I was distraught. In the dark basement, what did he just watch? Who is this child? It all seems so unreal, a nightmare I never woke up from. I tried to gather the courage to follow the boy, to find out what secrets he was hiding, and why he was so obsessed with the tamarind trees in my backyard. I went to the window and looked outside, but was met with a terrifying sight. The boy slid down the tamarind tree with supernatural agility. His limbs shook strangely as he descended from the twisted torso. Every movement was smooth and terrifying at the same time, as if it was possessed by unimaginable powers. As I watched, the tree's shadow seemed to take on a life of its own. It spread and tangled around the boy, forming twisted shapes that twisted and twisted in a macabre dance. An ominous whisper filled the air, a cacophony of incomprehensible voices echoing through my mind. It's been weeks since that terrifying encounter in the basement. I tried to convince myself that it was just a hallucination, that my mind had tricked me, but the feeling of fear persisted, like a shadow clinging to my back. I started researching the history of the house. I discovered it had been unoccupied for many years before I bought it. Rumors of unexplained tragedies and events surrounded the previous owner, who apparently disappeared without a trace. The days passed slowly, but the fear did not disappear. The nights became more disturbing. I would often wake up feeling like I was being watched, that something was lurking in the shadows of my room. One night, I decided to take drastic measures. I installed security cameras throughout the house, hoping to catch any abnormal activity, but what I saw in the recordings added to my horror. In the dead of night, the pale, skinny boy came back again and again. She could see him sneaking into the backyard, carefully avoiding the fence he had built. Then, he would climb up the tamarind tree and start gathering the fruits, which he loved so much. But this time, I also saw something new. After picking the tamarind, the boy was looking straight into the camera, his dead eyes piercing my soul. A shiver ran down my spine as I watched his mouth slowly open, revealing a ghastly grin. Horror seized me. He knew he had to do something, and he couldn't live in this nightmare forever. The situation became unbearable. That hideous boy kept stalking me over and over again, standing outside my window. His steady gaze and ghastly smile made my blood run cold. He waved the tamarind between his bony fingers, as if to mock despair. The recurring events and the constant presence of the child began to overshadow me. My health was rapidly deteriorating. I felt exhausted the whole time, as if I had a huge weight on my shoulders. The nightmares intensified every night, plunging me into a spiral of fear and paranoia. One day while riding the subway, encountered something disturbing. The car was particularly empty, but after a few stops, a little boy got in, accompanied by his mother. To my surprise, the boy kept looking at me with a look of fear in his eyes. It was incomprehensible to me why that unknown child was looking at me this way. Curiosity washed over me, and at last I heard the boy ask his mother in a trembling whisper if the boy I was carrying on my back was ill. Those words echoed in my mind like a terrifying echo. I felt a shiver run down my spine, as if the world had been turned upside down. The subway incident left me confused and full of questions. How did that child say that? I'm carrying a child on my back, and at the same time feel so sad. Is it possible that the terror plaguing him was somehow manifesting in the outside world? I felt the line between reality and horror become blurry and menacing. Since then, things have gotten worse. The presence at my back became even more oppressive, as if a dark being was clinging to me. Every step I took was an effort, and exhaustion took root in every cell of my body. I felt trapped in an endless nightmare. I decided to desperately search for answers. I've consulted doctors, psychologists, and paranormal experts, but no one seemed to understand what I was going through. Every attempt to help was in vain, leaving me alone and drowning in the abyss of my anguish. The nights are getting sadder. The boy's apparitions intensified at my window, and his sinister grin registered in my mind as an indelible image. I can no longer differentiate between dream and reality. The boundaries between them were fading away in a whirlwind of terror. My health continued to decline, and each day became a battle to stay afloat. The weight on my back became unbearable, as if I were carrying the tortured soul of that child. My muscles weakened, my eyes darkened, and my thoughts became hazy. It was often difficult for me to distinguish reality from my disturbing dreams. I fell into a constant state of confusion, as the boundaries between wakefulness and sleep blurred. My mental exhaustion led me to experience bouts of sleepwalking, where I found myself wandering aimlessly around my house in the middle of the night. One particular night, when it was raining hard on the windows, I suddenly woke up in my backyard. I was lying on the ground, beside the tamarind tree, the rain soaking my skin. My eyes widened in horror as I watched something come down from the top of the tree. A hideous figure, resembling a giant spider, slid downward with jerky movements. At first, I thought it must be another scary dream, but feeling the rain on my body reminded me that it was a harsh reality. The pale, skinny boy fell to the ground, letting out a dreadful shriek that reverberated through the night, before running in the opposite direction, disappearing into the darkness. My body trembled with fear and confusion as I rose from the ground. The rain continued to fall mercilessly, drenching me to the bone. I stared at the tamarind tree, whose twisted branches seemed to hold an unfathomable evil. However, something inside of me prompted me to follow the boy. With every fabric of my being screaming at me not to, I plunged into the darkness, chasing his spectral figure through the dense forest that surrounded my property. The trees seemed alive, their branches creaking, and sinister whispers echoing around me. The rain intensified, turning into a curtain of water that made it hard for me to see. Despite this, I kept moving forward, driven by an irrational impulse and a determination that defied common sense. My steps became clumsy and wobbly, but I didn't let that stop me. I couldn't let it go. I couldn't allow the horror that gripped me to take over someone else. Suddenly, children's laughter echoed in the darkness. The rain fell like blades on my skin as I headed toward that laughter that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. The forest seemed to warp and move, shadows dancing around me as if animated by some malevolent entity. Finally, I came to a clearing in the middle of the forest. The boy was there, in the center, surrounded by twisted and distorted tamarind trees. Her laughter now turned into a chorus of childlike voices, each one more chilling than the last. His empty eyes looked at me, inviting me to come closer. It was until that moment that I realized the folly I had committed. I ran home as fast as my legs could carry me. I perfectly remember how, when my curiosity had made me turn several times, I could see with horror how this monstrous child pursued me as I moved briskly on all fours, all while laughing in a creepy way. That picture still makes my skin crawl every time I remember it. That experience was the last straw. I could not bear the constant torment and malicious presence in my house any longer. I decided to take drastic measures and face the darkness that surrounded me. I have done extensive research on how to purify the tamarind tree. In truth, I had no idea what I was really looking for, but I was willing to do whatever it took to regain my peace of mind and get my hard-earned home back. After several hours of research, both in bookstores and on the internet, I discovered an ancient exorcism ritual that involved burning sacred herbs and using words of power to drive away dark spirits. This ritual, on top of all the ones I encountered, seemed like something I could do, so I gathered all the necessary items and prepared myself to face this entity. The night chosen to carry out the ritual was shrouded in a thick fog. The air was heavy and filled with an eerie silence. In the backyard, a tamarind tree seemed to follow me, its twisted branches moving in a menacing dance. I approached the tree with determination, though my heart was pounding in my chest. I lit the sacred herbs and let the smoke billow towards the tree. I read the exorcism words, leaving my lips a whisper charged with determination and faith. Smoke engulfed the tree, seeming to fight off the darkness that clung to it. A cool breeze started blowing, bringing the fresh air with it. Suddenly, a mysterious figure emerged from the branches of the twisted tree. It was a dark and dangerous figure, a ghost of malice and despair. The malevolent spirit of the tree manifested itself before me, wriggling and making a fearful howl. The fear was indescribable, however, and he did not intend to give up. I wanted to end it all, so I continued. That soul started to become more corporeal in a second. That boy looked at me with a blank and lifeless look. While trying to pronounce the ritual words correctly, which I memorized well before the ritual began. However, at that moment, the words didn't come out of my throat, no matter how hard I tried. In an instant, that baby was thrown at me, letting out a ghastly shriek that ran down my spine. However, instead of knocking me down, as I thought, it tore me apart, leaving behind a thick mist. The moment it passed through me, it instantly collapsed. I felt as if my whole heart stopped for a moment. A chill engulfed my existence. For a moment, I thought this would be the end of me. But fortunately, I woke up the next day still in pain at the foot of the tamarind tree. I had enough strength to get back inside, and for the next few days, I couldn't even get out of bed, except for the most important thing. One day, when I was feeling more energetic than usual, I decided to continue cleaning my basement. He hoped to turn that space into a playroom, a place full of joy and free from the oppression that plagued him. As I was moving some old boxes, one of them fell to the floor, revealing an old, worn out. The journal appeared to belong to a child, but the faded ink and faded pages made it hard to read. However, some of the read parts revealed a life full of abuse and violence. The boy recounted his day to mention that he used to go days without eating and being severely beaten by his parents. As I read through the horrific experiences recorded in the diary, I felt a deepening of empathy and connection for the boy. I begin to understand that the boy who haunted my house and the tamarind tree has a tragic history, and that his existence is connected to the dark secrets that have plagued the place for so long. Digging deeper in my search for answers, I found an old newspaper from those dark years. In its pages, the tragic news of a child who fell down the stairs and broke every bit of his bone was reported. The news has been classified as an accident, and the parents have not been charged with any crime. But now, with the journal in hand, I knew the truth. I tried performing rituals and prayers to free the tormented soul of that child, but nothing seemed to work. He was stuck in a limbo between the world of the living and the world of the dead, without finding the peace he so desperately needed. Finally, I came to a painful conclusion. I had to leave the house that was once my home. It was the only way to free myself from the cycle of terror and darkness that had consumed me for so long. With a heavy heart and hope for a new beginning, I closed the door to that damned house for the last time. I left the shadows behind and entered the light of day, finally freeing myself from all that had tormented me. Although the scars of the past remain, I have found the strength to rebuild my life. Every day is a step towards reason and redemption. The old cursed house has turned into a nightmare that no longer